It should say, there it is.
So hi everyone, welcome to the first seminar series organized by GUPDA. Today's talk will be by DanaHunter from the Research Development Services. She's a Research Outreach and Assessment Associate for Research Development Services. Today she'll be talking to us about finding and applying for postdoctoral fundings. Without further delay, over to you, Dana.
Great. Well, thank you very much. I'm very glad to be talking to all of you today. And this talk that I'm doing is geared specifically towards postdocs, and others might have seen me talk to groups of graduate students and postdocs mixed together, but hopefully today these resources will be very beneficial to you as postdoctoral researchers and moving from a mentored research scientist position, hopefully eventually to an independent research scientist. So, Sambu, if you could just allow me to share my screen.
Trying to do it.
There.
Okay.
Perfect. Let me just get this started. So hopefully everybody can see the slideshow now. Great. So today we'll just talk about some of the fundamentals of getting started as you're looking to find an opportunity, apply for, prepare your application, kind of the big picture that you need to be keeping in mind as you start this process. And then we'll talk about how to actually find opportunities for funding. This will talk about both federal and philanthropic sources. We'll do a quick Pivot demonstration. Pivot's a very powerful database, and this will be very useful to you as you're trying to find funding sources. And then we'll talk about just the very high level overview of submitting an application and other resources available at GUMC, both in my office and other offices on campus. Then anytime we have left over, we'll just use that for questions and make sure you've got contact information for everybody from RDS. So getting started, there are a lot of moving parts to sponsored research. You may be thinking about yourself kind of just as one person in a lab, but there's always this larger overarching component, not just of the sponsored research and the research that you're doing in your lab, but also, you know, GUMC, we've got a Dean for Research office. We've got tech commercialization with the lawyers looking over patents and patent applications and the IP that the university manages. You know, regulatory affairs play into this, whether you're using radioisotopes or hazardous chemicals or controlled technologies. If you're doing any kind of international related research, there's a large amount of kind of bureaucracy that goes on top of that as well. So even though you feel that this is kind of your project and you want to take it to the next step and get funding for it, you're always kind of working within a very interconnected web. So on the one hand, don't be overwhelmed by this. There is a lot going on here. Also, you know, and remember that RDS, my office, myself, or my colleagues, we're always here to kind of guide you through every step of the process. And then we'll go into this timeline a little bit more in detail later in the presentation, but I just want to put it out here to begin with, just to remind you that when you're looking for research funding and then writing your proposal and getting it submitted, it's very difficult to do this in a week or two. You know, we always kind of want to be as much as possible working on as long of a timeline as possible. So here, you know, we have things kind of spaced out on a 6-week timeline where you found your opportunity, or I've helped you discover it, or I got an email and sent this to you, I think you might be interested. You know, we would like to have at least 6 weeks from you deciding to apply for a proposal submission to actually submitting it on the day that it's due. And again, this is an ideal timeline. Things don't always work out on this, but as you yourself are kind of thinking about I need to find some funding, or I really should find funding, or, you know, this one opportunity is coming back around, you know, try to work on as long as a timeline as possible. You know, this is beneficial both to you in terms of identifying the components of the proposal that you're going to need to write, any letters that you might need from the university that certify your eligibility or promise resources on your behalf. That's very important, and also just to some of the internal stuff that, again, we'll talk about later in this presentation, the internal review and submission process. And then even just having time to review the complete application package to look for any typos, swap out document versions, etc. So as mentioned at the beginning, my office is Research Development Services. Our website is rds.georgetown.edu. I try to keep this a very living document, a very useful document. I want this to be definitely a first stop for you as you're looking for funding opportunity and applying, and you really have it as a strong resource for you to always be able to refer to. Just a note, if you are from main campus, your research development services analog on main campus is main campus research. So if your primary appointment is in biology or psychology, you will be working with them to submit your proposal very much in the same way that if you are on the medical campus, you work with me in RDS, you'll have a colleague in main campus research who will do very much the same process in terms of finding funding, pointing you to opportunities, and then using our internal submission and review tools. So first steps, on the RDS website, I have funding pages broken out by some of the main opportunities that, or the main funders of research on the GUMC campus. So of course, NIH is the big one. We do have some NSF funding in some areas. DOD is surprisingly a very large funder of biomedical research. DOD actually funds the most breast cancer research out of all the funders in the US. I also have this broken out by corporate and foundation and fellowship funding specifically. On the fellowships page, this is kind of an overview that again kind of points you towards some general fellowship information, whether it's NIH or NSF or DOD related. I do also include a list of common fellowship funders from the philanthropic communities at GUMC, like the American Cancer Society or the American Heart Association. If you're looking for a fellowship type of opportunity, this is a great place to start. If you know you want something that's a little bit more NIH specific, on the NIH page on the RDS website, I do have links to some of NIH's tools that are very good when you're looking for NIH opportunities, looking for program directors at NIH, similar projects that may have been funded. So the NIH Guide to Grants and Contracts that I have linked here, that is the one-stop shop to find every funding opportunity that NIH has. The table of contents is a weekly digest that you can subscribe to. It's emailed on Friday afternoons. It is basically a compilation of everything that NIH has published that week, whether it's an administrative note from the director's office talking about types of fonts allowed in proposals, or notification of changes to current funding opportunities, whether an institute or a center has joined a funding opportunity, or if a new funding opportunity has been announced and it's going to be made available for applicants. Reporter and Matchmaker are two tools on the NIH website that you can use to find programs, or I should say proposals that have been funded in your area of research. So if you're not sure kind of who might be the best program director or which institute or center might be most interested in your particular project, you can use these tools to find that information. So for postdoctoral fellowships at NIH, there are three main types. One is the F32, which is the Research Service Award. But for most postdocs at GUMC, the ones that are really of most relevance are the K99 R00 and the K01. So the K99 R00 is also great because this one specifically does not include a US citizenship or permanent residency requirement. So for a lot of the international fellows, postdoc fellows at GUMC, this is a really great opportunity, and you should definitely look very specifically at it. So what the K99 does is this funds a few years as a postdoctoral fellow where you're still in a mentored research scientist relationship with the PI from your lab. And in this application, they give you instructions on what to write regarding what research you'll do as a postdoctoral fellow and how you'll pivot that to being an independent career researcher. And so the R00 phase is a second component of the award that when you move on from the postdoc phase and get an appointment, say as an associate professor or assistant professor, you'll have some funding built in to support your initial research as an independent researcher. This is also great because when you're on the job market, looking for that first independent research position, this is a great kind of thing to dangle out to prospective employers because you'll already come in with some funding already guaranteed for your research. The K01 is one of the other career development opportunities focused specifically on postdoctoral fellows. This is called the Mentored Research Scientist Development Award. So here you would still work very closely with the current PI of your lab or your mentor to develop a comprehensive 3 to 5 year project to put you, when you complete the K01, the goal is that it would put you in a position to be able to apply for an R01. There are other K-type career opportunities that do come up at NIH. These might be issued more on an ad hoc basis from individual institutes and centers. Some of these may also be focused on diversity initiatives. So NINDS may put out its own diversity-related call for a K01 or a K99. Same with NCI. NCI makes available a diversity-related K01, for example. So definitely something to always kind of keep a lookout for, even if you see an institute is not participating in the parent K99 R00, for example. It may be because they put out their own specific institute-specific K99. DoD is also a massive source of funding for GUMC. Most of this is done through CDMRP, which is the Congressionally Directed Medical Research Program. And again, funds a lot of medical research, a lot of cancer research, and a lot of research that is of interest specifically at GUMC. So I do link here the 2 areas where you can find a lot of DoD funding opportunities through CDMRP. One is their synopsis of current program funding opportunities, and the other is their pre-announcement funding opportunities. So CDMRP are a little bit different in terms of how they announce their opportunities. Always a good idea to keep an eye on that pre-announcement page, because what they will do is they will send out a press release essentially that says, on August 15th, we will release the program announcement for breast cancer funding. And those proposals will be due November 30th, for example. So that's the best way to keep track of them. They don't, unlike NIH, they don't kind of have a parent opportunity that is just open year round that has specific deadlines throughout the year. DoD kind of instead announce that they will announce a program and then just drop a deadline about 90 days later. So DoD does do postdoctoral funding. Unlike NIH, it is not consistent in how they name their postdoctoral programs, or even how someone at the postdoctoral level might be eligible for one of those awards. Generally, the early career, early investigator awards at DoD will be titled such as Breakthrough, Idea Development, Early Investigator, Horizon has been used as some of these. But for each funding opportunity, you will definitely want to review the eligibility criteria. There is variation even within CDMRP as to who might be eligible as an early investigator in breast cancer, but not in rare cancers, for example. So it is a little bit frustrating because you can't just see a title of idea development or horizon and know exactly that you may be eligible for that project. It's highly dependent on funding opportunity, but there are very good opportunities within DoD to get funding for not only cancer research, they do fund lots of other types of basic translational and clinical sciences as well. So corporations and foundations are the other main funding source that as postdocs you're going to want to look at GUMC. And the nice thing about corporate and foundation funding that we'll go into further is that you do not always have to be a US citizen or have US permanent residency to apply for corporate and foundation funding. There's $2.5–3 billion available in this area at any one time to support scientific research. And a lot of corporations and foundations especially, are very interested in supporting early career scientists and working and helping you develop your research skills through mentoring to eventually also put you in a position to apply for an NIH R01, for example. So on the RDS website, I do have a page that's dedicated specifically to resources to find funding opportunities in this area. We also have another office at Georgetown, the Office of Institutional Partnerships. It serves both main campus and the medical campus. They can also be a resource for you to find funding matches on the philanthropic side of things sometimes, and they can also help you find money within the Georgetown community that's been donated as gifts to the university. A lot of gifts that we get are designated for research in a particular scientific area or for an early career professional, or maybe just not dedicated to something specific. So OIP are also a great resource. We work closely with them on the RDS site to keep them apprised of the types of research that is happening at GUMC so that we can also kind of proactively work to match people with money that they're made aware of. So one of the things I want to point out about philanthropic funding, for example, is that, you know, it's very synergistic with federal funding. You know, 2017, 2.3 billion in private funding for basic science. You know, there's a lot going on in this area. So, you know, if you're, especially as an international postdoc student, you find you're not eligible to apply for some of the NIH postdoc fellowships, don't think that, oh, I'm only eligible to apply for foundation funding. You know, don't think of it as a step back. It's just a lateral step. This is done very synergistically with federal funding. In a lot of cases, philanthropic funding can fill in gaps that federal funding doesn't cover. So if you're working in a rare cancer, for example, there's probably a foundation that is going to be actually probably even a better source of funding for you if NIH doesn't cover in that area. And so definitely really strongly consider philanthropic funding sources when you're looking for funding opportunities. So on the next couple slides, I have just a few examples of postdoctoral funding opportunities specifically. And on these slides, these are specifically ones that do not require US citizenship or US permanent residency. So you can see just the breadth of funding opportunity available, whether this is for cancer research, general medical scientists, brain and behaviors covered, general life sciences, specifically breast cancer. We can even apply for stuff based on graduate women in national science. So there's a lot of areas for this. And also a lot of these foundations will focus specifically on diversity related initiatives as well. So that can further help narrow down the applicant pool when you're applying for these. So for example, we see the Alzheimer's Association does both a research fellowship and a research fellowship to promote diversity. So just a few other items to keep in mind as you're looking for corporate and foundation funding. Usually the budgets on these are very strict or very limited. They may provide only salary support. So you may still need to be working in a mentor's lab and have your mentor have funding that can fund the purchase of laboratory supplies or publication costs, etc. Some of these will say no travel can be put on these awards. So, you'll need to adhere very closely to the budget guidelines that they give you. Most often, these don't allow any kind of indirect costs. So 0% is very common. Gates Foundation is always 10% of IDC allowed. That's more on just the administrative side of these, but that's very common. And again, like I said, many do not have US residency or citizenship requirements. And it may take a little bit longer if you do receive one of these awards for it to be set up. And so just kind of be aware of that if you get notified that you get an award. It may be a foundation that Georgetown has never received any money from. So there's a lot of contracting and setup of award terms and conditions and negotiation that has to happen on the back end before that money is released. And that's often because sometimes the foundations will sneak in very sneaky terms like, we own all the IP that comes out of this award. And Georgetown has to go back and say, no, this is research in the public interest. Please remove that. And so, don't be surprised if on the award side of things, it may be a little bit hinky before things come through. And also always keep in mind that RDS will always be involved with the application process for a foundation or a corporate award, even if you have to submit it yourself, either through an application portal or by emailing it to the program director of the foundation. This is really just to ensure that Georgetown knows that you're applying for this, that we have all the correct numbers on the budget, and that should an award come through, that Georgetown will be prepared to accept the award on your behalf and distribute funds and do any reporting on the back end. A lot of the foundations, just depending on their resources, don't use a fancy submission portal like Proposal Central. They may just have you email it, and you might read the solicitation and think, oh, well, I just put this together and email it in. Don't do it by yourself. Please don't. RDS will always be involved. So one of the things I want to talk about today is Pivot. On the RDS website, you can get to this through our funding databases page. On the databases page, we have links to grants.gov, which is how to find funding for the entire US federal government. Also linked directly more towards the CDMRP page. If you're looking at FDA, we have the FDA page there. But Pivot is especially good because it is a worldwide comprehensive database. This is going to pull in information for government, state and local funding, corporations, philanthropic associations, professional associations. It has a very powerful search tool. You can set your profile up to get very tailored funding opportunity emails to you. And this is a subscription that Georgetown pays for. So take advantage of it. So I'm going to actually just switch my screen real quick so that we can just walk through Pivot real quick, so you can kind of see the usefulness of this. Let's see. There we go. So are you all able to see this little roundel of the Pivot website?
Yes, I can see it.
Okay, perfect. So at this moment, Pivot is tracking 64, almost $65 billion in funding opportunities. And you can see as you like kind of scroll around this, just how much is available in every kind of particular area. So 42 billion in natural sciences. In health and medicine specifically, we've got 23 billion, 6.7 for medical disciplines, disease, tumors. So you can kind of just, it's kind of mind-boggling to just scroll through this and click through it. So when you log into Pivot, we do have kind of a little intro to Pivot guide on the RDS website. It tells you how to set up your username and password for Pivot so that you're associated with Georgetown. This will allow you to set up a profile. So as you can see here, I put in my position, my expertise, what I'm interested in. And so you see science policy, research. So these are some of the areas that I'm in. And so I can just click over here on funding opportunities. And this is giving me a current list of funding opportunities based on those keywords that I'm looking for. And if I want, I can have it set up so that Pivot sends me a digest every Sunday evening of the newest opportunities. I definitely encourage you to do this once you log into Pivot, because you can set up searches, you can save those searches so that when you log in, you can just automatically go towards that search, get updates every week about this. This will greatly simplify your search for funding. And so going into the search fields, I'd always, you can always start with the basic search for pancreatic cancer, for example. I definitely recommend actually using the advanced search function. This allows you to, match all fields, match any fields. It uses the same Boolean operators that you would use on kind of any library or database search. But one of the things that allows you to do on the front end is look for funding types. So if you're looking for something specifically for fellowships, you can select that. So you can say pancreatic, so pancreas and cancer fellowships specifically. You can search by applicant type, whether, it's looking for early career individuals, minority only, women only. You can search, narrow this down on the front end to specific funders. So US federal government, public sector, commercial, private, professional societies, private foundations, etc. So this is a great way to use that. You can also narrow this down by citizenship or residency. So if you are an international postdoc and you're looking for opportunities that you're available for, click the unrestricted and unspecified boxes so that you kind of catch those ones that do not have any restrictions. So just looking at, fellowships, no restrictions on citizenship for pancreatic cancer, and we've got one coming from the Prevent Cancer Foundation. So this makes it very easy to find these types of fees, $100,000 available for fellowships in pancreatic cancer, for example. And so definitely log into Pivot, click around, play around with all of these search tools. The other thing it does track our conferences. So you can also use Pivot to find opportunities to find not only opportunities to submit abstracts and papers to conferences, but also funding to go towards conferences. So that's also another kind of hidden bonus of Pivot. And there is actually one more aspect. So when you go to your profile and you set it up, this will also, it does also allow you to find kind of like-minded collaborators. So one of the things when you go into Pivot and you put in, you know, your keywords and your expertise, you can use Pivot to find collaborators as well, both within Georgetown and within the larger Pivot community. So it's a very powerful tool. Definitely take advantage of it. It's very unique opportunity that Georgetown's made available. So let me get back to where we were. So for the next part, we'll just talk about the broad overview of submitting an application. So once you've found your funding opportunity and you're ready to submit, we do have an internal process that we have to go through. And this is because proposal submission is not just you as the PI submitting the proposal, it's Georgetown University. And so think of it as Georgetown is actually asking for the money and submitting the proposal, and you're the person that's identified as to be doing the work for that proposal. So, you know, even though you're working with just me and RDS on the submission part, I'm just one piece of the larger, broader research organization within Georgetown that covers both the pre-award side, which is RDS and OSR, CROO if you're doing any clinical trials, but then once you get an award, the broader award management and financial management aspects of that. So again, back to the submission timeline, when you've identified your proposal and say, you come to me 6 weeks before or 2 months before, or 3 months if you know it's coming up, I or a colleague in RDS will work with you to go through the solicitation. We'll identify the elements of the proposal that are required, any budget limitations. I or my colleague will work with you to actually put a budget and a budget justification together. So you're definitely not alone on having to figure out what's part of the proposal, putting a budget together, what is indirect costs, etc. And so then, you know, 3 to 4 weeks before the deadline, we can even start to hopefully, you know, work with you to finalize a budget justification so that we can do the internal routing, which is GUPass. So again, we'll do GUPass. Once that's approved, we can then work with the final documents, upload them into the application portal, or assemble that final PDF for you to review so that, you know, we have all the I's dotted and T's crossed before we hit submit. So on the pre-award side of it, the 2 offices are RDS, which is mine. We're the faculty facing side of you. And we really want to work with you to develop this proposal. On the other side is OSR, which is we call sponsor facing. They are the ones that actually do the submission to the sponsor on behalf of Georgetown University. They have the power on an NIH proposal to actually put the university's signature on that. And they'll handle any requests for just-in-time information that you may get from a sponsor after the proposal is submitted. This is just us and RDS, gives you an idea of who you're working with when you come to our office. So, you know, right now we're all virtual, and you just might be a name and an email signature. But this is us, and we do each have bios on the website, so you can learn a little bit more about who you're working with. So what RDS does when you come to us and we help you put the proposal together, if this is your first time submitting an NIH proposal or doing a full research proposal, I generally always sit down with the person that's going to be putting an application in, especially if it's their first time, and we'll work together to make sure you understand the process, identify everything that's necessary for submission. So I'll give you a checklist of documents needed. I'll help you put together the budget and help you fill out any forms that might be needed for this. A lot of these proposals do need institutional information, like an employer ID number. So don't think that you see a form and that you have to fill it out. No, it's probably me that will fill it out for you. I also will make sure that all the applications comply with not only Georgetown policy, but the sponsor policies, so that if there are any requirements in that solicitation, that all of those requirements are met, and that also Georgetown's requirements are met. And if there are any compliance issues that come up, I can also help you kind of manage those compliance issues. When it does come time to submit the proposal, OSR will actually submit anything to NIH, DOD, NSF. RDS, my boss, Melissa Lehman, will submit the foundation proposals. And that's really just a workload distribution because we have so many proposals going into federal agencies that my office is able to take over submitting anything to foundation proposals. We will also track and report pending proposals, both for the Dean of Research for their reporting to executive leadership, for example. And we can also assist with other items related to proposals here and there, because you may have a subaward on a proposal that you put together that may be necessary. You can also assist with preparations of biosketches and CVs, especially for gathering biosketches for any mentors or consultants that you may have on your proposal. We can get a previous version and get it to that mentor so that they're able to very quickly update it for your particular submission, whether they need to use an NIH style biosketch or a shorter 2-page CV, for example. We'll also assist with kind of any reporting down the line after an award that comes out for proposals. So this is just kind of a general division of responsibilities between what the PI, which would be you even as a postdoc when you're putting together either a fellowship or an early career development award, and what the proposal specialist would do. And so the other component of this that's very important to mention for submitting a proposal at Georgetown is GUPDA. This is our internal routing, review, and compliance system. So what we use GUPDA for is to just give administrative review of a proposal so that people know that this is happening, that Georgetown will be committed to carrying out the work that this proposal is proposing. This looks at the financial aspects of it. OSR will approve the budget and the budget justification. For the proposal, make sure that we've got the right salary levels. We've got, if there's any cost sharing, that which is when the university has to guarantee that it will contribute funds to the proposal. Sometimes our CFO needs to review those types of things. This also helps us with space and resource planning because it allows us, as we put together the proposal package in GUPDA, we can check off the shared resources that we're using. We keep track of the labs and the offices that are being connected to a proposal. So that helps with other work or in operations at GUMC that you don't necessarily think are related to your proposal exactly, but do impact the overall sponsored research arena at Georgetown. This is also how you can submit your financial conflict of interest for proposals. So when we do GUPDA routing, we don't actually need your full proposal. So don't worry about it. Even though on the timeline it says 10 to 15 days in advance of the deadline, we do GUPass. We only need a few components, and that's just the list of personnel. The title is helpful too. I give you a GUPass checklist when you notify me that you're interested in submitting. And this helps me fill out the form in GUPass. So you don't even have to fill that form out yourself. I will fill it out for you. And we just route it with the budget and the justification, a project description or abstract or specific aims. Doesn't have to be finalized at this point, just enough that we can have an idea of what the project is about. And so that when we're reviewing the budget, we can kind of see if the budget and what the budget is requesting are in line with what the project will actually be doing and who will be working on the project. And we also will take in any information that you have related to using animals, humans, biohazards, etc. If you've got IACUC approval, or you're still waiting for IRB, or you haven't submitted yet, we'll track that as well. And we can also, again, put in information related to cost share. If there are institutional letters that need to be signed, certifying your eligibility for a proposal, this is where we can also put that in to make sure the right signatures get on it. And this is also why we want to do this as much as possible 10 to 15 days in advance, just so that we've got time to get letters signed, to fix any issues with a budget that might pop up. Much better to do this, of course, 1 to 2 weeks before the proposal is due rather than the day of. And then again, just a little overview of how the GUPass process works. So I initiate the transmittal. It'll go to you as the PI to review. You say, yes, I'll be working on this. This will go eventually to the department chair so that they know that you're applying for this, and that they can also use that to help track any research commitments identified in your department, who's bringing in funding, et cetera. And then this goes to various levels of approval at the medical center, if applicable, whether, like I said, if that's the CFO's office, if there's cost sharing. And OSR, which is our partner office, sponsored research, they do the final review and approval. And so just to finish up, I want to talk about additional resources, or where to find resources on campus, both to assist you with finding proposal funding, you know, how do you use Pivot, et cetera. On the RDS website, we've got a page, we keep forms and templates available for you. So BioSketch templates, for example, a copy of GUPass or a budget template. We have training documents. So we've got one for setting up your Pivot account, how to use my NCBI or Science CV. We've got those types of documents there. We've also have links to some training videos. There's some great videos from Pivot that they put out, again, about logging in, how to set up your account, how to set up your profile on Pivot, et cetera. And I do try to keep these updated. If you find something that might be of interest, or you think we need something in this area, feel free to let me know. I'm happy to add as necessary to support you guys, because this is really what this website is for, is to support you for finding and applying for funding. We also have right now what we're calling GUMC special programs. This name hopefully maybe will change in the future to something a little bit more descriptive of what it actually is. But these are links to the mock study section and speed grant reviews that Priscilla First's office leads. So there are processes available for internal GUMC peer review of your proposal or an initial idea that you would like to develop into a research proposal. So you can click on the mock study section or speed grant reviews, get information about those, and it'll take you to a link to a Google form to fill out what, you know, what type of assistance you're looking for, whether in a speed grant review, is this a poster session document, is this a seed that you're trying to develop into a full research proposal, etc. The mock study section is great. This will actually give you an NIH style review by GUMC peers of a proposal. It does have a much longer timeline in terms of documents being ready for review. So you will need to go into this with 4 to 6 months maybe, because they do need a significant amount of time to be able to review the proposal. But then, you know, when it does come down to the mock study section, you'll be able to sit in on that session and listen to your colleagues discussing your proposal much as they would in a full-on NIH review session. So that's a great resource as well. And then also Dahlgren Memorial Library. This is the GUMC library. They have great subject librarians. They put together research and subject guides. They also lead lots of online training regarded to using tools for managing data, keeping up to date with some of the latest technologies for managing your research, your own research resources, writing papers, and how to use tools to assist in that process as well. And they can also do some research consultation services as well. And also remember Main Campus Library, they have lots of STEM librarians over there who are also great resources, especially if you're working on anything a little bit interdisciplinary and need support there. So any questions? Happy to answer those if there's any for time. And I do also include contact information here for everybody in RDS. So myself, my boss, Melissa Lehman, and the other proposal specialists there.
Dana, thanks so much for giving this very nice and like, this is very informative. I'm sure, like with all the information in one place. I have one question. So you mentioned that most of the foundation grants, they support salary, but are there grants which are like kind of like transitional? So if a person is trying to establish himself or herself as a PI, other than K99 and those, are there anything like which will support more than the salary, or which the person,
Yeah, so of course it's going to vary foundation to foundation, but there are a lot as well that do provide support much in the same way as a K01, for example, or a K99 R00. And so it's very important to just look at each foundation opportunity by itself, read the fine print in there. So there are some that are just going to be more limited and say we're only providing salary support. There are others that will provide support for research supplies, travel, publication costs, much like an R01 would do. And there are tons that are definitely in that transitional space between a postdoc and an early career independent investigator. So while they might use different terminology from what NIH does, they're doing very much the same thing, which is, you know, the goal of this 3-year mentored grant will to put you in a place to provide or to submit an application for a fully independent research grant.
And you, obviously you or your office will be able to guide.
Yep.
Thanks, Dana. I mean, it was a really informative talk. I had a question regarding, do we have a resource where we know like what people from Georgetown University like acquired as grants from the previous years? Like what was a success? I mean, what postdocs did and what they achieved. I mean, that would be like a good place to know if we can really like get it done. So like especially with grants like K99, like we know that it's really competitive, and that's why one reason people don't like sometimes like keep away from it. I'm not discouraging people, but just
Yeah, so definitely with like the NIH grants, for example, I'm always able to go to the NIH website and look up success rates for those types of grants. Those will be more general to NIH. Regarding applications specifically from Georgetown, that is not yet a data pool that we have readily available. I can definitely put you in touch with somebody that may be a previous applicant for that. Some of that is just related to privacy of people's applications and also personal pride. If they didn't get funded, they maybe feel, you know,
Yeah.
they don't want to be identified as the person who applied but didn't get funded for this. So there's definitely resources on NIH to find the overall success rates for programs, both at the NIH level and also by institutes and centers, and also what those pay lines have been for those. In terms of Georgetown, I'm always happy to find other applicants for that type of application to put you in touch with so that they can share their experiences and such. We have looked at also putting together kind of an application example database or box folder that you could access from the RDS website to find good examples of successful applications of what does a K99R00 look like versus a K01. And that's something that's been an ongoing process of just, of course, finding people willing to make that shareable, removing any confidential information from that type of thing, for example. But definitely, you know, if you come to me with a very particular type of proposal, I will help you find, you know, successful examples or successful applicants to get in touch with.
Thank you. One more question. So the pivot, the pivot that you are talking about, is there filters that you can search based on like your citizenship and nationality? Is that something that pivot allows you to do? I don't know if I missed that part.
Yes, so pivot does allow you to search based on nationality. You can also exclude nationalities for those searches. So that's why it's a very useful tool. So you can definitely find, if you are not a US citizen, you're able to find opportunities that are specifically available for non-US citizens. Or example, if you have citizenship from Canada and you want some funding available to Canadian citizens, you can use that to find funding specifically for your nationality if you want to as well.
Thank you. I think that's it with the questions, I guess.
Well, it was really great to speak to you all today. And again, please have, you know, feel free to share this. I will definitely make the slides available, and feel free to email me anytime if you've got any questions, or just to say, hey, this is who I am and this is my lab and area of interest. I'm always happy to meet all of you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much.